Welcome to Critical IT Solutions podcast series, where technology leadership meets innovation. Join us as we explore the ideas shaping modern IT, from cybersecurity to quantum computing and everything in between.
Here's a number that should stop you cold. Companies around the world are on track to spend over $400 billion on AI in 2026. $400 billion. And yet, according to S&P Global's June 2026 report, only 37% of AI initiatives launched in the past year are actually live and delivering value. So we're collectively spending more money on AI than the GDP of most countries, and the majority of it isn't working yet. Today, we're getting into AI adoption and automation readiness. Specifically, what separates the companies that are genuinely winning with AI from the ones stuck running the same pilot program for the third year in a row, why the skills gap is quietly the biggest crisis in tech right now, and what the policy landscape means for where this all goes next. I've got someone here who's been deep in this data, and I want to start with a question that I think a lot of people are afraid. Is the AI hype actually matching reality right now?
It's matching in some places and completely falling apart in others. And that gap is actually the most interesting story in tech right now.
Okay, break that down for me.
So let's start with what's real. According to the McKinsey Global AI Survey, 72% of enterprises have at least one AI workload running in production as of Q1 2026. That's up from 55% in 2024 and just 20% back in 2020. So the adoption curve is genuinely steeper actually, than electricity or the internet at the same point in their diffusion, according to the World Economic Forum.
Wait, steeper than the internet?
That's what the data shows. The WEF compared adoption trajectories of major technologies over their first 25 years, and AI stands out for its sharp acceleration. But here's where it gets complicated. Having an AI workload in production is not the same thing as being AI ready. Those are two very different things.
That's a distinction I don't think most people are making. So what does it actually mean to be AI ready?
Cisco put together an AI Readiness Index that I think is one of the cleaner frameworks out there. They surveyed over 8,000 senior leaders across 30 markets and 26 industries, and they measure readiness across 6 pillars: strategy, infrastructure, data, governance, talent, and culture. And they sort organizations into 4 tiers: pace setters, chasers, followers, and laggards.
And I'm guessing most companies aren't pace setters.
Correct. And the gap between pace setters and everyone else is striking. Pace setters, the ones scoring 86 or above, have 75% of their staff reporting AI proficiency. At other organizations, that number is just 16%.
75 versus 16. That's not a gap, that's a canyon.
It really is. And it points to something that I think gets buried under all the spending headlines. The number one barrier to AI adoption globally isn't budget, it isn't technology access, it's skills. According to Alice Labs' Global AI Adoption Index 2026, which draws on Eurostat, OECD, and national statistical agencies, 70.9% of EU enterprises cite skills as their top obstacle. That's the highest ranked barrier globally.
So you can buy all the software in the world and still be completely stuck.
Exactly. You've just bought very expensive shelf decoration. And this is where the adoption story gets really nuanced because the numbers look different depending on who you're talking about. Large enterprises, companies with 5,000 or more employees, are at 83% adoption. Mid-market is at 64%. But small businesses under 50 people, just 18%, according to the same McKinsey data compiled by Meta Cloud.
So there's a massive size divide baked into this.
A 38 percentage point gap between large and small enterprises in the EU alone, according to Alice Labs. And that divide matters because small businesses are the backbone of most economies. If AI productivity gains are only flowing to the top of the market, that's a structural problem.
Let's talk about what this looks like on the ground, because I think the manufacturing sector is where you can really see both the promise and the gap playing out in real time.
Manufacturing is a great lens for this. Siemens, for example, has been using AI-powered IoT sensors in its factories to forecast equipment failures and optimize maintenance schedules, what's called predictive maintenance. The result is reduced downtime and lower maintenance costs. GE's Predix platform for predictive maintenance is estimated to deliver up to $2 billion in annual savings, according to case study research compiled by the marketing agency.
$2 billion from one platform.
At scale, yes. And quality control is another area. AI systems are catching 90% more defects while speeding up inspections by 50%. according to the same research. Production optimization through AI typically delivers 8 to 25% improvements in throughput. These are real, measurable numbers.
So the technology clearly works when it's deployed well. What's stopping more companies from getting there?
A few things. First, the ROI timeline is longer than people expect. The same case study research notes that most AI implementations take 12 to 18 months to deliver positive ROI, if everything goes right. Some take up to 2.5 years. And in a world where leadership wants quarterly results, that's a hard sell.
Yeah, and I imagine that's where a lot of pilots die. They just never get the budget to scale.
That's exactly it. McKinsey's 2025 State of AI report found that companies focusing on value creation, scalability, and differentiation are 2.5 times more likely to see significant returns. But most organizations are still treating AI as a series of disconnected experiments rather than a coordinated strategy.
And that brings us to the execution gap you mentioned at the top, because the S&P Global numbers on this are kind of alarming.
They are. S&P Global's June 2026 report, which draws on their Purchasing Managers Index survey and 451 research data, found that only 46% of AI initiatives launched in the past year are deemed on track to achieve positive ROI within 12 months. And only 37% are assessed as live and actually delivering value.
So more than half of AI projects are either behind schedule or not delivering. That's a staggering failure rate for something companies are pouring hundreds of billions into.
And the S&P report is pretty direct about why. They say AI's capacity to replace or augment labor is constrained by delivery challenges related to trust, data, and skills. The technology may be advancing faster than organizations can reliably deploy it. That's the core tension.
That's a really interesting framing, the technology outrunning the organization's ability to absorb it.
The World Economic Forum put it well in their January 2026 piece from the Davos annual meeting. They said the question for CEOs is no longer how rapidly AI will scale, but how quickly organizations can align their workforce, operating models, and governance to translate that scale into sustained business value. That's the real race.
Okay, I want to push on the workforce angle here because this is where it gets politically charged. Everyone's worried about job losses. What does the data actually say?
The data is more nuanced than the headlines suggest. S&P Global's report found that among enterprise AI objectives, process efficiency is the top priority at 64%, followed by employee productivity at 59%. Headcount reduction? That's only cited by 24% of companies as a primary goal.
So most companies aren't actually trying to replace people, they're trying to make people faster.
That's the dominant intent. And the S&P report also found that across 38 AI use cases, only 22% of projects target a fully autonomous end state. The vast majority are augmentative, AI working alongside humans, not instead of them.
That actually reframes the whole conversation. But there is still a negative employment effect happening, right?
There is, and S&P is honest about it. Their PMI survey shows a global net employment impact of negative 5 percentage points over the past 12 months, meaning more businesses are reducing headcount due to AI than increasing it, and they forecast a further negative 2 points in the coming year. So the effect is real, it's just more modest and more indirect than the doomsday scenarios suggest.
Job cuts as a side effect rather than the goal.
Exactly. And the WEF's Reskilling Revolution initiative estimates that around 1.1 billion jobs could be transformed by technology over the next decade. Their Future of Jobs report 2025 says AI and information processing will affect 86% of businesses by 2030. The key word there is transformed, not eliminated, but only if companies invest deliberately in people and redesign work rather than just layering technology onto old structures.
That's a big if, though, because the skills investment piece seems to be where a lot of companies are falling short.
It is. And Fabian Stephanie from the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford made a really compelling historical argument about this in a WF piece from February 2026. He compared AI to electricity and the internet. And his point was that electricity only transformed economies once engineers and technicians could deploy it at scale. The internet only became economically transformative once digital skills spread beyond a small technical elite. AI follows the same logic.
So we've been here before, just with different technology.
The pattern is consistent. General purpose technologies don't just improve existing processes, they reorganize societies. But the reorganization only happens when the skills diffuse broadly enough. Right now, AI skills are concentrated. Job vacancies explicitly requesting AI-related skills have risen steeply, according to WEF data, but the supply of those skills isn't keeping pace.
Let's zoom out to the policy level, because I think this is where things get really interesting and honestly a little messy. What's happening on the regulatory side?
It's genuinely messy. In the US, the White House issued Executive Order 14365 in December 2025, which is essentially a directive to prevent states from creating their own patchwork of AI regulations. The argument is that 50 different state regulatory regimes make compliance harder, especially for startups, and that a minimally burdensome national standard is needed for the US to win what the order explicitly calls a race with adversaries.
So the federal government is actively trying to preempt state-level AI regulation.
That's the direction. And then in March 2026, the White House released legislative recommendations for a national policy framework for AI, covering everything from child protection to community safeguards to infrastructure permitting. Meanwhile, the GAO published a report in September 2025 identifying 94 government-wide AI requirements already on the books, from federal laws, executive orders, and guidance documents.
94 requirements. That's already a lot of compliance overhead.
It is. And the GAO found 10 executive branch oversight groups with a role in federal AI use, including the National AI Advisory Committee and the National AI Initiative Office. So there's a lot of governance infrastructure being built. The question is whether it's coherent enough to actually accelerate adoption rather than slow it down.
And that tension between innovation speed and regulatory coherence is playing out at the state level too, right? Like there's a real geographic dimension to this.
Absolutely. My Solutions just released their U.S. Automation Readiness Index for 2026, and the findings reveal what they call a massive geographic divide. They scored all 50 states on a 1 to 100 scale across 7 pillars: digital infrastructure, workforce density, on-the-floor technology, manufacturing GDP, productivity gains, and electricity costs.
And who came out on top?
Texas, with a score of 79.76. My Solutions describes it as the capital and connectivity anchor, scale and modern infrastructure working together. But the interesting finding is that traditional industrial states in the Midwest and South are aggressively scaling up, while some major economic heavyweights are hitting structural bottlenecks.
So it's not just a national story, it's hyper-local. Your zip code might actually determine how exposed you are to automation disruption.
That's a real way to think about it. And My Solutions makes the point that it's no longer enough to just have factory floor space. Sustainable growth now depends on what they call technological resilience, and that requires an ecosystem of support, from robotics and AI to ERP software. You can't just drop a robot into a facility that isn't digitally ready.
That ecosystem framing is interesting, because I think a lot of people imagine automation as just buying a machine, but it sounds like it's more like building an entire operating system.
That's a really good analogy. And it connects back to why the Cisco Readiness Framework has 6 pillars, not one. Strategy, infrastructure, data, governance, talent, culture, you need all of them working together. A company that has great infrastructure but no AI strategy, or great talent but no data governance, is going to struggle. The Economist Intelligence Unit made a similar point in their Automation Readiness Index commissioned by ABB. They looked at innovation for automation, skills for an automated economy, and managing workplace transitions as 3 distinct but interconnected challenges.
So readiness is almost more of a organizational design question than a technology question.
I'd argue it's primarily an organizational design question. The technology exists. The question is whether the organization is structured to absorb it, deploy it, and actually get value from it. And right now, the data suggests most organizations are not.
Let's talk about the spending side for a second, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. We mentioned $400 billion at the top. Where is all that money actually going?
So IDC's Worldwide AI Spending Guide projects global enterprise AI spending at $407 billion in 2026, up 34.8% from $302 billion in 2025. AI software, platforms, applications, tools represents 48% of that. AI services are 34%, and hardware and infrastructure are 18%. And within that, generative AI specifically accounts for $127 billion, growing at 59% year over year, the fastest growing segment in all of enterprise IT, according to IDC.
59% year over year growth. That's almost hard to process.
And the infrastructure side is equally wild. Gartner projects the global AI infrastructure market, GPUs, AI servers, networking, will hit $104 billion in 2026. NVIDIA alone controls an estimated 82% of the AI training chip market, with data center revenue exceeding $100 billion in fiscal year 2026.
One company controlling 82% of the chip market that the entire AI economy runs on. That's a concentration of power that I don't think most people have fully reckoned with.
It's a significant dependency, and it's part of why the White House's push to streamline federal permitting for AI infrastructure, data centers, power generation is so politically loaded. The energy demands of AI infrastructure are enormous, and the March 2026 legislative recommendations specifically address making sure residential ratepayers don't bear the cost of new AI data center construction.
So there's a real community impact dimension here that goes beyond just jobs.
Electricity costs, grid reliability, local infrastructure, these are all downstream effects of AI scaling that don't show up in the adoption statistics but are very real for the communities where these data centers get built.
Okay, I want to come back to something you said earlier about the most widely adopted AI use cases, because I think it's actually kind of funny given all the hype.
Right. So S&P Global's report looked at 38 AI use cases and found the most widely adopted ones are summarization at 71%, translation at 62%, and data management at 61%. So the most common thing companies are doing with AI is summarizing documents and translating text.
We're spending $400 billion to our emails faster.
I mean, it's not nothing. Those are real productivity gains. But it does put the gap between the hype and the reality in sharp relief. The transformative use cases, autonomous decision-making, fully automated workflows, are still the minority. Only 22% of projects are even targeting a fully autonomous end state.
Which is actually kind of reassuring from a the robots aren't taking over perspective.
For now, the trajectory is clearly toward more autonomy over time. But the S&P report is careful to note that constraints, trust, data quality, skills are likely to limit progress in the near term. The technology may be advancing faster than organizations can reliably deploy it. That's the honest assessment.
So when you step back from all of this, the spending numbers, the readiness gaps, the workforce shifts, the policy scramble, what does it actually come down to?
It comes down to a fundamental mismatch between investment and readiness. The money is flowing, $407 billion in 2026, projected to nearly double to $632 billion by 2028, according to IDC. The technology is maturing fast, but the organization deploying it, the workforce is using it, and the policy frameworks governing it are all lagging behind. And that lag is where the real risk lives.
And the companies that are closing that lag, the pace setters in Cisco's framework, what are they actually doing differently?
They're investing in people first. 75% of their staff report AI proficiency. They have a coherent strategy, not just a collection of pilots. They've built data governance before they needed it, not after. And they treat culture as a pillar of readiness, not an afterthought. The WEF's HCL Tech CEO piece from Davos put it well. AI value creation has to shift from isolated tools toward IP-led solutions built through coordinated technology and industry ecosystems. That's a fundamentally different operating model.
And for the companies that are still in pilot mode, still stuck at 37% of initiatives actually delivering value, what's the honest advice?
Stop buying technology and start building capability. The McKinsey data shows that companies focusing on value creation, scalability, and differentiation are 2.5 times more likely to see significant returns. That means being ruthless about which use cases actually matter for your business, investing in training before deployment, and measuring outcomes, not just activity. The gap between AI ambition and AI execution, as Meta Cloud's Enterprise AI report puts it, is the defining challenge for IT leaders in 2026.
Here's what this really comes down to, and I think it's the thing that should stick with everyone listening. The AI race isn't being won by the companies spending the most. It's being won by the companies that are most ready.
That's exactly it. And readiness isn't a technology problem, it's a people, process, and governance problem. The 70.9% of EU enterprises citing skills as their top barrier aren't failing because they can't afford the software, they're failing because they haven't built the human infrastructure to use it. That's the real automation readiness crisis.
And the stakes are genuinely high. The World Economic Forum estimates 1.1 billion jobs could be transformed by technology over the next decade. Whether that transformation creates opportunity or displacement depends almost entirely on whether organizations invest deliberately in their people, not just their platforms.
And that's not a guarantee. The WEF is explicit that AI will create more jobs than it displaces, but only if companies invest deliberately in people and redesign work, rather than simply layering technology onto old structures. The only if is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
So we started with $407 billion being spent on AI and only 37% of it actually working. And we're ending with the same question reframed. It's not about how much you're spending. It's about whether your organization, your people, your processes, your governance is actually ready to turn that spending into something real.
And the companies that figure that out first aren't just going to win the AI race. They're going to define what the next decade of work looks like for everyone else.
That's a genuinely high stakes ending. And honestly, the most actionable thing anyone listening can take from this, find out where your organization sits on that readiness spectrum. Not the spending, the readiness. Strategy, infrastructure, data, governance, talent, culture. If you can't answer where you stand on all six, that's your starting point.
And if you're an individual contributor wondering what this means for you personally, the WEF data is clear that AI skills are already affecting wages, job quality, and hiring decisions. The time to build those skills is before your organization needs them, not after.
We started this episode with a number that should stop you cold. Here's one to leave you with. The companies scoring highest on AI readiness have 75% of their staff AI proficient. The rest, 16%. That gap is the opportunity and the warning all at once.